For $50,000, I pretended to be my brother to care for his blind fiancée. The day she regained her sight, I disappeared without a word. We met again during a business press conference. I was an intern reporter. She had reclaimed her status as the powerful heiress of the Hayes family. The interviewer asked, "We hear that during your illness, your fiancé, Mr. Miller, was a constant source of support. Is it true that wedding bells are in your future?" A small smile played on her lips as she raised her hand, revealing a ring. "Yes, he and I are getting engaged." But her eyes drifted, deliberately or not, to where I stood in the corner. Before the conference began, the room was buzzing. The heiress we're interviewing today is the one calling the shots at the Hayes Corporation now. I heard she went blind 5 years ago and was even cast out by the family. If her fiancé hadn't stuck by her, she probably wouldn't have survived. I sat on the sidelines, a strained smile fixed on my face, my fingernails digging into my palms. Suddenly, my senior colleague, Mark, turned to me. "Frank, go get me a glass of water, will you?" I had just reached the water cooler near the entrance when the main door swung open. Someone walked in. My mind went completely blank. In 3 years, Diana Hayes had changed almost beyond recognition. Her once slender, fragile frame was now poised and confident, the lines of her face softer, more mature. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was cool, her eyes glancing past me as if I were a complete stranger. She didn't pause for even a second, flanked by several bodyguards. She made her way to the stage. I stood frozen as she walked past me. It took a few seconds for it to click. The 2 years I spent with her were when Diana was at her absolute lowest. She had been thrown out of the Hayes family and blinded in a car accident. Of course, she had no idea what I looked like. It was better this way. By the time I got back with the water, the press conference was underway. Diana sat on the stage, her gaze sweeping across the audience with calm composure as she fielded questions about her business. Suddenly, a side door near the stage opened. My brother, Ethan, walked in, smiling apologetically at Diana. "Sorry, Diana," he said. "Something came up on set. I'm late." He straightened his suit jacket and took a seat beside her. The room fell silent for a beat before a wave of excited, romantic murmurs filled the air. Mark took a sip of water and glanced at me, his eyes wide with a new discovery. "Frank, you know, you and Ethan Miller actually look a little alike." I pursed my lips and managed a weak smile. "He's a huge movie star. You're giving me too much credit." Of course we looked alike. We were brothers. "We hear that during your illness, Mr. Miller here never left your side. Are wedding bells in the near future?" My throat constricted. I stared at Diana on the stage. A faint smile touched her lips as she lifted her left hand, showing her ring finger. On it was a simple, unadorned silver ring, the very one I had worked a side job to buy, just to see her smile. The prestigious heiress of the Hayes family wearing such an inexpensive ring looked completely out of place. She traced its surface with her fingertip. "Yes," she said, "he and I are getting engaged." As she spoke, her eyes scanned the crowd below. Whether by accident or design, they landed on me in the corner. After just a few seconds, she pulled her gaze away. The microphone was passed to Ethan. "Mr. Miller, we hear you're filming with director Evans. He's known for not casting newcomers. Did Ms. Hayes' influence play a part in that?" Ethan smiled graciously. "Of course. I've always been confident in my own abilities, but I won't deny that Diana has opened a lot of doors for me. I believe I'm worthy of her support." His confident and open manner won over the crowd. Someone else asked, "Could you share a little about how you and Ms. Hayes supported each other when she was going through her lowest point?" The smile on Ethan's face froze. A strange silence fell over the room, and time itself seemed to slow. After a long moment, Diana let out a soft laugh and took the microphone. "There isn't much to tell. The memories we share are for us alone." My eyes suddenly burned. I gripped my pen, lowering my head in a fluster. If I closed my eyes, the memories would come flooding back. As a teenager, Diana's rebellious spirit had made her more than a few enemies. After she lost everything, some of them came looking for payback. I was trying to protect her and got shoved down a flight of stairs, leaving me bruised and bleeding. The sight of the blood scared them off, and they scrambled away. I gritted my teeth, got to my feet, and tried to act like nothing happened as I walked back to her. "Let's go home," I said, but Diana suddenly grabbed my hand. "You're hurt. We need to go to the hospital." "I'm fine. I can smell blood." Her voice rose, tears spilling from her unfocused, clouded eyes. When she spoke, it was my brother's name she used. "Ethan," she whispered, "when I can see again, I'm going to give you the most magnificent wedding the world has ever seen." After the press conference, the sky had turned a gloomy gray. A fine mist of rain was falling outside. Mark patted his pockets and then turned to me. Frank, I left the SD card inside. Can you run back and grab it? I jogged back across the wet pavement. The elevator dinged, the number 1 lighting up. The next second, the door slid open. I came face to face with the 2 people inside. Ethan had his head tilted slightly, chatting with Diana about some trivial thing that happened on set. Her expression was neutral, but she was listening patiently. They looked close. When Ethan saw me, his face soured instantly. Sorry, I mumbled. I turned to take the stairs instead, but Diana's voice cut through the air behind me. Wait, I froze. Weren't you waiting for the elevator? Get in. I turned back slowly, intentionally deepening my voice. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. She told me to get in, but didn't move to make room, her eyes fixed on me. You were one of the reporters today? I don't recall you asking any questions. I looked down. Ms. Hayes, I'm a recent graduate, just an intern. I wasn't authorized to ask questions. I see, she said. Her reply was non-committal, her thoughts unreadable. Beside her, Ethan shot me a venomous look. We should go, Diana. We have that dinner with Director Evans tonight. Diana finally pulled her eyes away from me. Let's go. I stood alone in the rising elevator, lost in thought. After my parents divorced, my father took Ethan and married into the wealthy Prescott family. I hadn't seen Ethan since I was a child. Then, 5 years ago, he showed up out of the blue. I'll give you $50,000, he said. You just have to pretend to be me and take care of someone. At the time, my mother had just died, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt. I had no other options, so I agreed. It was only later that I learned who I was supposed to care for. Diana Hayes, the family heiress. She was also his fiancée, who had suffered a terrible accident right after they got engaged. She's blind and a family outcast. Who wants to be saddled with that? He'd said, his face twisted in disgust. If I weren't worried about my reputation, I would have called off the engagement ages ago. Back then, Ethan was just starting his acting career. He'd landed a big role and was on the verge of stardom. Afraid of being seen as a heartless jerk, he passed the burden on to me. Diana had lived a charmed life for 18 years before disaster struck. The change made her temper volatile. In those early days, she constantly lashed out at me with bitter, sarcastic words. I was being paid, so I took it without complaint. Until one day, I visited my mother's grave and got back a little late. She started in on me again, her anger spilling over. She never finished her sentence. Because in that moment, I leaned down and kissed her. It was my first kiss, clumsy and artless, fueled more by a flash of anger than passion, feeling more like a desperate bite. But Diana fell completely silent. The tips of her ears flushed a deep red. Feeling a little wicked, I bit her lip gently. Then I pulled back, my hands on her shoulders, my breathing ragged. Did you feel that? I asked. Do you still think I can't stand you? I found Mark downstairs and gave him the SD card. He thanked me, and we headed out. By the time we arrived at our destination, it was already dark. I spotted a familiar black Rolls-Royce in the parking garage and froze. Are Ms. Hayes and her group here tonight? Mark turned and winked at me. The dinner I'm taking you to is her dinner. Frank, don't underestimate my connections. It was too late to back out now. I had no choice but to follow him inside. Fortunately, the private dining room was huge. Junior reporters like us weren't seated at the main table with Diana and the executives. Mark took me around, introducing me to industry veterans. This is our newest hire, a sharp kid named Frank Miller. Frank, say hello. As the new guy, I couldn't avoid the endless rounds of toasts. Eventually, the room started spinning. I mumbled an apology, clapped a hand over my mouth, and made a dash for the men's room. I was violently ill. After rinsing my mouth and splashing cold water on my face, I stepped back out into the dimly lit hallway. A familiar silhouette stood in the shadows by a window. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to pretend I hadn't seen her and walk away, but after a single step, Diana's voice stopped me. Her voice was a low murmur, laced with 1,000 complex emotions as she spoke my full name, syllable by syllable. Franklin Miller. I stopped dead in my tracks. I swallowed hard, hearing the soft, deliberate sound of her footsteps approaching. I squeezed my eyes shut. The footsteps stopped right in front of me, and her familiar scent enveloped me. I opened my eyes to find her staring at me, her own eyes as deep as the ocean. Ms. Hayes, I said, my voice tight with nerves. How did you know my name? She didn't answer right away, just studied me for a long moment before straightening up. Your colleague was introducing you to everyone. The whole room knows your name. Thinking of Mark's booming voice, I felt my face flush. Sorry about that. He's just very enthusiastic about helping out the new hires. I apologize if we disturbed you, Ms. Hayes. I tried to explain, worried I might get Mark in trouble. But Diana simply went quiet again. Under the warm light, she narrowed her eyes, a ghost of a smile on her lips. In your eyes, Mr. Miller, do I seem like a petty person? I kept my head down. That's not what I meant. The next second, a gold foil business card was held out in front of me. You're still an intern, correct? I have a job opportunity for you, if you're interested. My head was still spinning when I got back to the table. Mark immediately pulled me aside. You okay, Frank? I rubbed my aching stomach. Sorry, Mark. I had stomach surgery a while back, so I can't really handle my liquor. He frowned, about to say something. Then his eyes fell to the card in my hand. His jaw dropped. Is that Diana Hayes' personal card? I nodded, my mind replaying the scene in the hallway. It was her private card, the one people said was impossible to get, with her direct line. You don't get something for nothing. I looked up at her, my guard up, careful to keep my voice neutral. Why would you give such a valuable opportunity to an unknown intern? A small smile played on her lips. Let's just say I like the look of you. That sounded exactly like the Diana I knew. During those 2 years, as we grew closer, she started letting her guard down, showing flashes of that old rebellious spirit, especially in certain moments. I'd grit my teeth, swallowing the sounds that threatened to escape, my fingers tangled in her hair. You can't see, so just be still, I'd murmur in the dim light. She would tilt her head up, soft bangs brushing against her unfocused eyes. She'd lick her lips, her fingers pressing lightly against the side of my neck. My other senses are fine, she would whisper. So you need to be louder. Let me hear you. I snapped back to the present and gave Mark a vague excuse. The next day at work, my editor called me into his office. He was all smiles. Frank, you know that hit reality dating show that's streaming live? Get ready. You're going to be on it as a special guest commentator. It turned out the next episode's special guests were none other than Ethan and Diana. After the press conference, their engagement was all anyone could talk about. The news went viral on Twitter, serving as the perfect promotion for the show. The comments were flooded with fans losing their minds over the couple. They went through hell together, and now they're on top of the world. It's the perfect love story. I heard the Prescott's family business was failing until the Hayes Corporation bailed them out. Now they're thriving. The ultimate power couple. If you don't ship them, you have no soul. I skimmed the comments and quickly closed the app. The host, a woman named Sarah, was reviewing her notes while making small talk with me. If we could get the real story of what happened with Ms. Hayes and her fiancé during those 2 years, the ratings would go through the roof. I tightened my grip on my pen and quietly agreed. I knew every single detail of what happened during those 2 years. I knew it better than anyone, but I couldn't say a word. Riding the coattails of the Hayes family's resources and connections, Ethan was now an A-list celebrity. The moment the show went live, millions of viewers tuned in. Under the bright studio lights, I heard Sarah begin. So, we hear wedding plans are underway. Could you share a little bit about your journey as a couple? Ethan turned to Diana with a gentle smile. All those terrible rumors that were spread about her back then, I never believed a single one. In my eyes, Diana has always been the woman I love. He gazed at her, his eyes practically overflowing with adoration. But Diana just lowered her lashes and let out a small, breathy laugh. Liar. Have you forgotten how much you couldn't stand me right after I went blind? Ethan froze for a second. His eyes darted towards me, a flicker of hatred in them. But with the cameras rolling, he had to force a smile. I don't really remember that. I guess as our love grew, I only held on to the sweet memories. I glanced at the live comments scrolling on the monitor behind me. The screen was filled with comments like, so romantic, and couple goals. I set down my notes, picked up my microphone, and directed a question to Diana. It sounds like you two remember things a bit differently. Perhaps you could tell us how you managed to work through those initial difficulties. I didn't think she would answer. But after a moment of silence, Diana began to speak. Right after it happened, I was a wreck. I hated the world, and I hated him. He was working long hours, but still had to take care of me in his spare time. One day, he was completely overwhelmed. He left fish stewing on the stove and ran downstairs to buy salt, but he forgot to turn off the burner. By the time he got back, the kitchen was on fire. My throat felt tight. In that hazy moment, I was transported back to that evening, the residual heat of the fire still hanging in the air. I had dragged Diana from the smoke-filled apartment, grabbing her by the collar. Were you trying to kill yourself? I'd yelled, my entire body shaking, my voice cracking. She didn't fight back like she usually did. She was quiet for a long time before her hoarse voice broke the silence. Wouldn't it be better if I died? It would be a relief for you, wouldn't it? I think it was in that moment I finally realized it. The once untouchable Hayes heiress was now just a lost, broken girl, all her bravado just an act. So, panting for breath, I pushed her back into the bedroom. The walls were scorched black. I undid the buttons of her shirt, one by one. "You burned my dinner," I whispered. "You'll have to be my compensation." She seemed to realize what was happening. "Are you sure about this?" she started to say, but I cut her off with a desperate kiss, swallowing her words. "Diana," I breathed against her lips. "I never thought of you as a burden." That night, it felt like the world had fallen away, leaving only the two of us. And now, here she was, reliving that memory with Ethan, my brother, sitting beside her, playing the part of her devoted fiancé. The entire world believed that memory belonged to them. A suffocating bitterness bloomed in my chest. Even from this distance, her familiar yet strangely different scent seemed to wrap around me, silent and overwhelming. But it wasn't mine anymore. She paused, and as the audience applauded, she added, "I'll never forget the moonlight that night. It was so bright you could see everything clearly." I couldn't see it, but he described it to me all night long. I clenched my pen and quickly looked down, my eyes stinging. Because I'd gone off script with my questions, we'd uncovered details no one had ever heard before. The interview was a massive success. By the end of the show, our viewership had broken 10 million. It was the first time anyone had gotten details about that hidden chapter of the Hayes heiress's life. Everyone was buzzing. Backstage, Sarah clapped me on the shoulder. "That was brilliant, Frank. A true reporter." Those questions were so sharp, she had no choice but to answer. Just then, I turned and saw Diana and Ethan approaching. Sarah went quiet. Diana's cool gaze landed on me. "Were those your questions today?" I nodded. Ethan's voice was deceptively smooth. "Mr. Miller, you certainly have a knack for hitting a nerve. But let me give you a piece of advice. Remember your professional ethics. Don't get ideas about things that are out of your league." I said nothing, my eyes shifting back to Diana. Her expression was sharp as she said coolly, "Mr. Miller is very capable. From now on, he will be our primary media liaison." Ethan's head snapped in my direction. His eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and pure hatred. Later, he cornered me in an empty hallway, his expression a mask of disgust. "Frank Miller, you're a greedy son of a bitch. You took my money and disappeared. What the hell are you doing back here now?" I looked at him calmly. "I graduated. I came back to get a job." It was a simple statement. "A job? Frank, do you take me for an idiot?" He suddenly exploded, his voice a furious shout. "Get the hell out of here. You tell her you're turning down the job, or I'll make your life a living hell." I ignored him and walked away. Ethan was true to his word. Suddenly, every door was slamming in my face. Opportunities that should have been mine were suddenly given to someone else. Then, one evening, my editor called me into his office just before I was about to leave. "Next month is our big annual development conference," he said. "I want you to host it." I was stunned. "Ms. Hayes specifically asked for you," he added. After I left the office, I saw it. Parked across the street was that familiar Rolls-Royce. The window slid down, revealing Diana's cool, impassive face. "Since you're so curious about my past, Mr. Miller, why don't you ask me about it yourself?" I looked down. "I have no interest in prying, Ms. Hayes. It was just for the story. Even so, I gave you my personal card. You could have called me." I pursed my lips. There was no need. In that moment, it hit me with full force that 3 years had passed. She was the powerful Diana Hayes, CEO of a corporation, not the fiery, vulnerable girl who would cling to me for comfort after one of her outbursts, begging for a kiss. The Prescott family's influence was waning. Without Diana's silent approval, Ethan would never dare to come after me so openly, which meant, perhaps, she wanted him to. To her, that part of her life was probably a shameful memory she wanted to forget. I turned to leave, but Diana's voice stopped me again. "Stop." She got out of the car, blocking my path. "Mr. Miller, can we talk?" My voice was hoarse. "What is there to talk about, Ms. Hayes?" A corner of her mouth lifted, and her eyes held a hint of something I couldn't quite place, something like resignation. "About the job. Can we talk about the job?" Over the next few weeks, Diana met with me twice more. We went over the key announcements for the press conference. At the end of our last meeting, as if she'd just remembered, she handed me a file. "This is a major tourism project we're partnering with the state on. It hasn't been announced yet. You can break the story at the conference. It'll be your exclusive." I was silent for a moment before taking the file and thanking her. When Mark found out, he urged me. "It sounds like she really respects you, Frank. Maybe you should subtly mention how Ethan has been sabotaging you." I just smiled as I edited my script. "No need. I said. Why would she cause problems for her fiancé over a reporter she barely knows? On the day of the conference, the venue was packed to capacity. The center seat on the stage, reserved for Diana, remained empty. Under the flash of countless cameras, I began announcing the Hayes Corporation's next major partnerships. Suddenly, a reporter I didn't recognize jumped to his feet. "Where did you steal that classified information?" he shouted. My expression hardened. My collaboration with the Hayes Corporation is entirely legitimate and professional. Legitimate? Does a person who sleeps his way to the top even know the meaning of the word? He yelled, and I have proof. Then, someone walked onto the stage. It was Ethan. He stared at me and sighed. "Frank, it's only natural for a young reporter like you to be infatuated with Diana. I wanted to spare you the embarrassment, but you just don't know when to quit." On the large screen behind me, the presentation suddenly switched to a series of compromising photos. The person in them was me. "You sent him these pictures," Ethan continued. "You showed up at his hotel room door late at night wearing nothing but a towel. And we have security footage of you checking into a hotel with your editor." As he spoke, the images on the screen changed. There it was, me and my editor walking into a dimly lit hotel lobby. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. At that exact moment, the main doors to the auditorium swung open. Diana strode in, her sharp gaze sweeping across the room. Her eyes passed over my face without a flicker of recognition. My heart sank. The spotlight pinned me to the stage, feeling like a public execution. The crowd below began to murmur loudly. "He's a disgrace to journalism. That's disgusting, absolutely vile. He has no ethics. He should be blacklisted." I didn't look at anyone else. My eyes were fixed on Diana. I watched as she turned to Ethan and asked coolly, "What was that you were saying?" Ethan said, "Diana, he's been playing you. He only got close to you to steal confidential information and sabotage the Hayes Corporation. He even slept his way into hosting this conference." Diana was silent for a moment, then her eyes met mine. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" What could I say? I could see the hatred and smug satisfaction in Ethan's eyes. The whole situation felt utterly absurd. He was my brother, only 2 years older. After our mother died, we should have been the closest people in the world to each other. I let out a bitter laugh. "Ms. Hayes, your fiancé is lying. He's deliberately spreading slander. If you're going to stand by and let him twist the truth simply because you love him, I will report that in my story about this conference. The public can see for themselves, and I doubt they'll trust projects led by someone with such poor judgment. Whether she was the rebellious girl I once knew or the ruthless CEO she was rumored to be now, I expected such a blatant threat to infuriate her. But she wasn't. Instead, she walked calmly through the lights and up onto the stage, stopping a few feet away from me. In a voice so quiet I could barely hear it, she said my name. "Franklin." A sudden, sharp ache filled my chest. I didn't want to hear her make excuses for Ethan. I turned my head away. "Every accusation made against me," I said, my voice firm, "is a complete and utter lie." Before I could say more, Diana's voice cut me off. "You gave me this ring. Don't you plan on taking responsibility for that?" I froze, my head snapping back to face her. She held up her left hand, showing the simple silver ring on her fourth finger. It was cheap, the craftsmanship mediocre at best, but she had taken such good care of it that it still shone brightly under the stage lights. That ring threw me back 4 years in an instant. It was Diana's 19th birthday. For the first 18 years of her life, her birthdays had been lavish, spectacular events. But that year, she had lost everything, and I was the only one there with her. I wanted to do something to cheer her up, so I took a 2-day gig between classes. With the couple $100 I made, I bought a cheap pair of matching silver rings. When I got back, I took her hand and slipped one onto her finger. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. Her ears turned pink, but she tried to sound casual. "What's this?" I teased her. "I saw a couple fighting on the street. They threw it on the ground, so I waited till they left and picked it up. Hope you don't mind a hand-me-down, Ms. Heiress." "Don't call me that," she'd whispered, carefully cradling the ring in her palm. "I don't care where it came from. I love it because it's from you." And she meant it. From that day on, she never took it off. I snapped out of the memory. Diana was walking toward me. "Say something, Franklin." "There's nothing to say," I mumbled. I lowered my voice. "You've mistaken me for someone else, Miss Hayes. Isn't that the engagement ring Mr. Miller gave you?" She scoffed. "I never said where it came from. How would you know that?" By the time she finished speaking, she was standing right in front of me, too close to escape. The crowd below began to whisper. "What's going on? Is she saying this reporter was the one with her back then? Then what about Ethan Miller?" "You know, They do look an awful lot alike. Ethan was glaring at me with pure hatred, but he forced his voice to be gentle as he tried to placate Diana. Diana, don't let him fool you. The man is a pathological liar. He has a history of this. I closed my eyes, forcing down the storm of emotions inside me. When I opened them again, my voice was steady. Yes, I gave it to you. I took money to pretend to be Ethan. I lied to you for 2 years. Then I took the rest of the money and left. I've forgotten all about it. You always thought it was him, and you're engaged to him now. What's the point of bringing this up? I couldn't say more. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a deep breath. I set down the microphone and turned to leave the stage. But the moment I turned, her hand closed around my wrist. The familiar warmth of her skin against mine sent a jolt through me. Her voice was a low murmur. Of course it has a point. You told me that as long as I wore this ring, you'd be able to find me anywhere in the world. Did you mean it? My eyelashes fluttered. I looked down, burying every emotion deep inside as I slowly, deliberately, pried her fingers from my wrist. When I looked up again, my face was a blank mask. I forgot. I was lying. During my years away at college, I thought about Diana constantly, especially during that winter when she was 19, right before she was set to return to the Hayes family. We were at the height of our secret love affair. The winter in Chicago was so dry that sometimes a spark of static electricity would jump between us when we kissed, a tiny, pleasant sting. I thought about telling her the truth more than once. There were so many moments, lost in passion, when she would whisper against my ear, her voice thick with emotion, Ethan, Ethan, don't ever leave me. Each time, it was like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. In those moments, the reality of my deception would come crashing down. From the very beginning, I was there under false pretenses, an imposter with a shameful secret. Diana had once told me, when I was little, my cousin tricked me into a closet and locked the door. I almost suffocated in there. I hate being lied to more than anything in the world. If she ever found out the truth, she would hate me to her very core. Just before Diana's 20th birthday, her grandfather fell gravely ill. On his deathbed, he finally learned the truth about what had happened. Diana had been set up from the start. Even the car accident had been orchestrated. He sent for Ethan, telling him to bring Diana home. Ethan showed up at my apartment. By then, he was a famous actor, and he looked down at me with an arrogant tilt of his chin. The Hayes family wants her back now. You're not still entertaining fantasies of hitting the jackpot, are you? Get real. To them, to Diana, the only person they know is me, Ethan Miller. You were always just a cheap imitation. He pulled a check from his wallet and tossed it at me. Here's another $50,000. Stop dreaming, or else I'll tell everyone the truth about what you did. I shot up, glaring at him. Ethan, she was your mother too. My mother is a Prescott, he sneered. What was she? Nothing but a whore. I snapped. I grabbed him by the collar and punched him twice, hard. The sound brought his bodyguard rushing in from the hallway. He twisted my arm behind my back and forced me to the floor. The great Ethan Miller stood over me, looking down his nose. Was I wrong? Take the money and get the hell out of the country. If I ever see your face again, I'll have every ugly rumor about her carved right onto her headstone. He left. I stared at the check lying on the floor. My mind went back 2 years. My mother's illness had left us deep in debt. When she died, I couldn't even afford a proper burial plot for her. That's when Ethan had contacted me. Money. He'd scoffed before I could even finish my sentence. She barely raised me. She's dead. Why the hell should I pay for anything? Of course I'm going with Dad to live with the Prescotts. You think I'm an idiot like you? His face had hardened then, cutting me off. What? Did you expect me to stay here and be poor with you? To live a life where you can't even afford a proper burial? I looked at the man in front of me now. The words caught in my throat. On that face, so much like my own, I saw nothing but impatience and disgust. The designer suit, the diamond cufflinks. Any single item he wore cost more than I could imagine. He picked up his coffee and took a slow sip. Finally, he got to the point. But, for old time's sake, since we are brothers, you need money. I can help you with that. $50,000. All you have to do is pretend to be me and take care of someone. The press conference had devolved into a complete circus. I could see people in the audience looking at Ethan with suspicion and disgust. A few reporters even turned their microphones and cameras on him. Mr. Miller, is what Ms. Hayes just said true? Was it really this reporter, and not you, who was with her during that time? Were your accusations against him completely fabricated? He was speechless. He turned to Diana, pleading, Diana, you know me. I've been by your side all this time. How could I do something like that? Diana looked down at him from the stage and smiled. Don't be scared. You said you had irrefutable proof, didn't you? My lawyers are here. They'll be taking a full record of today's events. Her voice was soft and soothing, but Ethan looked at her as if she were a monster, and he began to tremble uncontrollably. The conference was clearly over. I gathered my notes and walked off the stage. Diana followed silently behind me. It's raining, she said. Let me give you a ride. The rain was coming down in sheets. I thought about it for a second and decided not to walk home in a downpour. As I settled into the passenger seat of her Rolls-Royce, I glanced over and saw a flicker of hidden joy in her eyes. Then I pulled out my phone. I realized the entire fiasco at the conference had been live-streamed. It was already trending on Twitter. Under multiple hashtags, users were fiercely debating. So Ethan Miller just stole this reporter's identity and took all the credit? How shameless can you get? Stole what? The guy admitted he slept his way into his job. Who knows who's telling the truth? I've seen the analysis. Those compromising photos are clearly photoshopped. Even if they weren't, he admitted he was paid to be there. He did the job. He took the money. What's he got to complain about? Am I the only one who feels bad for Diana Hayes? She's been lied to by both of them. Neither of these guys is any good. That last comment hit me like a punch to the gut. I quickly locked my phone and stared out the window. Rain streamed down the glass like tiny rivers, blurring the city lights into a kaleidoscope of color. The city looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. But between Diana and me, everything had changed. Back then, the Hayes family had flown in the world's top specialist. After 2 surgeries, Diana's sight was finally restored. Ethan had hired bodyguards to watch me around the clock, making sure I couldn't get anywhere near Diana to tell her the truth. And yet, on the day she was to see for the first time, those same men brought me to the hospital. I stood outside her room, unable to see her, but I could hear her voice, laced with anxiety. Ethan, I'm here, Diana. Ethan's voice was a low murmur. I was so worried about you. He had altered his voice, making it sound almost exactly like mine. Diana didn't seem to notice the difference. She just sounded a little disappointed. You promised you'd be the first person I saw when I could see again. You broke your promise. I didn't stay to hear the rest. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through my chest, so intense it almost consumed me. From the very beginning, in Diana's world, the person who had been with her for those 2 years was Ethan. Not me. Not Frank Miller. Ethan's bodyguard dragged me into an empty waiting room. A few moments later, Ethan's new stepmother, the Prescott matriarch, walked in, her expression as haughty as ever. She gestured to her son, who stood behind her, a small cut on his lip still bleeding. Diana did that. She's completely in love with him. She can't live without him. She spoke slowly, her voice dripping with condescension. You took very good care of her these past 2 years. But as far as she's concerned, my son did all of it. Someone from your background could never, ever be with a girl like her. Where are you headed? Home. Diana's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I kept my head slightly bowed. Could you drop me at the office, Miss Hayes? I have some work to finish. But she didn't start the car. Instead, she leaned across the console, one hand on the steering wheel. She looked almost hurt. Frank, do you have to be so formal with me? Her familiar scent, mixed with the clean smell of the rain, filled the small space between us, threatening to pull me back into the past. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I pushed her back gently. What do you want me to call you? Ms. Eris? Diana? Or should I just wait until I do something for you? And you can call me Ethan, just like you did 3 years ago. She was speechless. Those 2 years are over, I continued. The man you're engaged to is Ethan. It was always Ethan. Your life is back on track. So why are you dragging me back into it? But this isn't my life, she said, her eyes turning red. I had never even met Ethan before all this. The person I knew, the person I fell for, was you. A deep, solid ache spread through my chest. I closed my eyes. When I spoke, my voice trembled. You're still lying. Diana, on the day you got your sight back, I was standing right outside your door. I heard you accept Ethan as me without a single question. She cut me off sharply. No, I didn't. The second I opened my eyes, I knew it wasn't you. I was stunned into silence. Diana's voice was deceptively calm. The Hayes family is a complicated beast. That day, in that hospital room, there was more than one person who wanted me dead. The moment I realized he wasn't you, I made a decision. Ethan was the perfect target, the perfect shield. A corner of her mouth lifted, but the smile in her eyes was sharp and cold. He loves playing the part, doesn't he? I decided to let him play it to the end. Flashes of old news headlines suddenly came to mind, articles I'd seen online while I was in grad school. One said Ethan had been caught in a real explosion on a movie set, and nearly burned to death. Another reported that a massive billboard had collapsed on him during a trip with Diana, a near-fatal accident. "I didn't ignore you on purpose," she said softly. "A lot has happened these past 3 years. After my grandfather died, members of my own family came out of the woodwork, one after another, trying to kill me. They're all either in prison now, or in the ground. That list even included my own mother. It's not that I was afraid of dying. When my cousin went crazy and stabbed me after I forced him out of the company, I barely felt it. In that moment, all I could think was, I missed you." The parking garage was silent. In the dim glow of the car's interior lights, she unbuttoned her blazer. She pulled aside her blouse to reveal a thin, white scar near her heart. The Hayes Empire is a messy thing to inherit. It wasn't easy to secure, but it doesn't matter. After today, Ethan and the last of the people who propped him up will be finished. The entire Hayes fortune, including me, can be yours. She leaned closer, her eyes searching mine from only inches away. The eyes that had once been clouded and unfocused were now as bright as a galaxy of stars. I swallowed hard. "But you and Ethan, I've never kissed him. Not once." Her voice was firm. "In my entire life, you're the only person I've ever kissed." That one sentence was all it took. The last thread of my restraint snapped. As I pulled her closer, a flood of memories, of all our passionate moments, washed over me. Her lowest point had also been the most aimless and uncertain 2 years of my life. All that raw, unchanneled emotion had found its only outlet in the desperate, tangled passion between us. By the time our storm had passed, it was late. Diana drove us to a house in the suburbs. I pulled out my phone and saw the top trending story on Twitter, marked with a bright red breaking tag. Hashtag Ethan Miller detained for questioning. "Last month," Diana explained, "my half-brother contacted him. He threatened to expose Ethan's secrets unless he stole bid proposals and other classified documents from me." I was quiet for a moment. "I know," I said softly. "You know?" She turned to look at me sharply. "Did you set this up, Frank?" I nodded, digging my nails into my palm to keep myself steady as I met her gaze. "I came back to destroy the Prescott family, to destroy Ethan, and to clear my mother's name from the lies they spread 20 years ago. I was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. It's the main reason I went into journalism. 20 years ago, the young heiress of the Prescott family wanted my father. So she set a trap for my mother, framing her as a prostitute. And Ethan, just a boy, went along with it. All for the promise of a rich man's life. He helped them destroy his own mother. My mother was held for 2 weeks and lost her job. When she came home, the neighbors whispered and pointed, all of them taking my father's side. After the divorce, my mother took me and moved back to her small hometown, carrying that shame with her. She fell into a deep depression and died from illness just after she turned 50. The day she died, the news was on the TV in her hospital room. It was a feature on the Prescott family. They called them a model of high society, praising the happy couple and their wonderful children. It was a joke. When my mother died, she weighed less than 100 pounds. Her hands were a mass of bruises from 4 needles. She should have lived a long, happy life. The Prescotts built their fortune on dirty deals. They've hurt so many people. How dare they call themselves a model family? I covered my face, forcing back the tears. "Diana, I used you. I knew you would never forgive a betrayal. So I made sure he would betray you in a way you couldn't ignore. If that hurts you, if you hate me for it, I understand. But I had to be the one to send him to hell." I pushed down every emotion, forcing myself to look at her with a level gaze. "But Frank," she said softly, "your hands are shaking." She took my hand from behind my back, brought it gently to her lips, and kissed my knuckles. "Don't be scared. The fact that you used me means you trust me, that I'm in your heart. I couldn't be happier. Of course I'm on your side. I told you. The entire Hayes fortune, including me, is yours." The story of Ethan's arrest dominated Twitter for 3 days straight. The Prescotts, desperate to control the narrative, went to Diana for help. She listened to their pleas from behind her large office desk, and then smiled. "That's a very touching story. But I'm afraid this decision isn't up to me. You'll have to ask my fiancé." My father and his Prescott wife turned and saw me. The color drained from their faces. I gave them a small smile. "You two should probably start getting your affairs in order, because you'll be joining him very soon." Diana called another press conference to clarify her relationship with Ethan. When asked, a wry smile played on her lips. "Fiancé? I never confirmed it was him. I was always referring to the man who was with me during that difficult time." A reporter called out, "But wasn't he only there because Ethan Miller paid him to be?" The smile remained on Diana's lips. but her eyes turned to ice. I'd choose your next words very carefully. There are plenty of rich people in the world. Why would he take money to take care of me, specifically? It's because he loves me. The reporter was silent, and sitting beside her on the stage, so was I. After the press conference, I released the audio recordings from my first meeting with Ethan. She's blind and a family outcast. Who wants to be saddled with that? She barely raised me. She's dead. Why the hell should I pay for anything? Did you expect me to stay here and be poor with you? To live a life where you can't even afford a proper burial? The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. No way. I thought his whole brand was being this classy, generous guy. So he and Frank Miller are brothers, and he's the one who paid his own brother to take his place? The guy wears outfits that cost 6 figures, but wouldn't pay for his own mother's funeral. That's disgusting. Riding the wave of public outrage, I went live. In front of over 1 million viewers, I told the 20-year-old story. The Prescott family heiress, Eleanor Prescott, wanted my father. Instead of just getting a divorce, they conspired to frame my mother, to ruin her reputation so she would have to live the rest of her life in shame. Standing behind me was a nervous-looking man with a buzz cut. It had taken me years of searching, calling in every favor I had from my time in grad school and my internship, but I had finally found him. He was a petty criminal who'd been in and out of jail. That thing back then, he mumbled into the microphone. Eleanor Prescott paid me to do it. The woman, Frank's mother, she was innocent. Her own son tricked her into coming to a party at the Prescotts. After she'd had too much to drink, I helped her to a bedroom and planted a stack of cash under her pillow. Eleanor had already called the police. Before my mother, who they had intentionally gotten drunk, could even wake up, the vice squad burst through the door. Even today, it's frighteningly easy to frame a woman, to spread vicious rumors, and brand her for life. And it was even easier back then. I became a journalist for a reason, and it wasn't just for this one case. I will dedicate my life to fighting for justice for anyone who has been wrongfully accused. The live stream was the final nail in the Prescott family's coffin. Their business had always operated in the gray areas of the law. Now, with federal investigators cracking down, they were caught red-handed. I was never the one propping them up, Diana told me later. That was my dear half-brother. Our companies only had a few joint projects, which I've already pulled out of. It won't affect me at all. I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. I turned over all the evidence I'd gathered over the years to the authorities. Thankfully, Diana had been meticulous about cutting ties with those people after she took over the Hayes Corporation, so she wasn't implicated in the slightest. The day the Prescott empire finally crumbled, I took Diana to the cemetery to visit my mother's grave. I brought a bouquet of her favorite flowers. In the photo on the headstone, her smile was gentle, but her eyes were tinged with a deep sadness. She was a kind, gentle soul, and she had truly loved my father. That's why she never recovered from the betrayal. Right before she died, I told Diana. She was lying in that hospital bed, and she squeezed my hand and made me promise not to blame Ethan. She said, "He's not a real Prescott. It must be so hard for him there." She had no idea. For all those years, Ethan had built his life in that family by demeaning her, by shaming her memory. He did it to get on Eleanor's good side, to secure his place in the family. He started to rot from the inside out the day he walked into that house. I looked at the photograph on the headstone. "Mom," I said, "no one will ever think you did anything wrong again." Diana, standing beside me, corrected me in a low voice. "Fiancée, right? Fiancée." I amended. I subconsciously twisted the matching silver ring on my own finger. I had hidden it at the bottom of a suitcase when I left the country. I never thought I'd have a reason to wear it again. I straightened the flowers in the vase, stood up, and paid my respects. When I turned back, Diana was looking at me intently. "Frank, could you wait for me in the car? I'd like to speak with your mother alone for a moment." The autumn air was crisp. I waited in the car for a long time before Diana returned, her trench coat damp with evening dew. I turned to her. "So, what did you two talk about?" She started the engine, but didn't say anything for a long moment. "I just thanked her," she said finally, "for bringing you into the world. If she hadn't, I would have died in the summer 5 years ago, when I was at my lowest." After the dust finally settled, I was officially hired as a staff reporter and even got a small promotion. I started taking on my own assignments. My first big story was about a high school girl who had been relentlessly bullied by a group of wealthy students for over a year. She had jumped from the roof of the school. "Their families are rich and powerful, Frank. No one wants to touch this," my editors said, hesitating. "If you don't want the assignment, of course I'll take it," I said. I accepted the file. In fact, I'm already working on a proposal for an anti-bullying advocacy campaign. I'll send you the draft this afternoon. With Diana's power and influence behind me, I knew I had to use it for good. The interview and the anti-bullying campaign that followed became my sole focus. It consumed me for the better part of a month. I barely saw Diana. She'd send me 20 iMessages, and I'd only have time to send back a single emoji while grabbing a bite and scrolling through social media feeds. One night, she told me she had a surprise for me and that I had to come home. When I opened the door to our apartment, the city lights twinkled outside the window like a sky full of stars. She was waiting for me, her eyes lingering on me with a heavy, languid gaze. A single lamp was on by the bed, and moonlight spilled into the room like cool water. But it did nothing to cool the heated air between us. "Frank, kiss me," she whispered. "Don't be so nervous, you idiot." Her words, mixed with the smoldering look in her eyes, were pure invitation. By the time the storm passed, the sky was already beginning to lighten with the dawn, and I suddenly remembered something. I have to go out of town next month for a big story. It's about a young girl in a remote Appalachian town who's been abused by people in her community for years. She walked all night through the mountains just to get to an internet cafe and contact me. It's a very isolated place, and the local power structures are deeply entrenched. It's not going to be an easy story to crack, so I might be there for a while. She sat up straight. "That sounds dangerous." "Maybe," I said, not overly concerned. I sat up and poured her a glass of water. Seeing the look in her eyes, I tried to reassure her. "I'll be as careful as I can. But this is the job. It's our responsibility as journalists." Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm coming with you. But don't you have that big contract negotiation next week?" "It can be postponed," she said simply. I tried to argue, but she cut off my protests with another searing kiss. Her lips moved down my throat, and I could feel her warm breath against my skin. She whispered, "Because I'm your most loyal protector. You just go and change the world. I'll be there to make sure you're safe."